And welcome back. Joining us for our second conversation is, of course, the CEO of the National Youth Movement, Mr. Shawn Saldano, to talk to us all about the organization, its objectives, its mission, its goals, and all that good stuff. Good morning, Shawn. Welcome to Open Your Eyes. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here as well.
Okay. Now, this is an amazing undertaking and somewhat different from the capacity where we normally see you in music. Talk to us about what gave you the inspiration to come up with this initiative.
Well, as I've mentioned, thank you for having me here. The National Youth Movement is a non-governmental organization, a youth-led non-governmental organization that I have founded and put into an organizational structure with the mandate to work with our children and young people, families, communities, and also institutional stakeholders to work and empower our children through education, through media, arts and sports, through entrepreneurship, and of course leadership and decision making, which is bracketed into governance, of course.
Now, Shawn, you're no stranger to youth development work, and in fact, you were very involved with other youth organizations before. What prompted you to go the extra step and establish your own NGO for young people?
Well, the reality is, of course, you would know before I established my own NGO, I was working with the government within the Department of Youth Services, and for 1 year, and I've seen where there is a lack of vision, and it's not within that department, it is a systematic flaw. And I've realized, you know something, as a young man, 70% of Belize's population is made up of young people. The reality is that there were challenges, there were obstacles, and I've said, you know something, I have the ability, I have the potential to reach out to my peers. And so with the vision and the mission that the National Youth Movement has then been erected to bring about, has allowed me to say, you know something, I'm able to push it off on my own. I will tell you that it was a challenging plight to get the National Youth Movement erected, because you see, the uniqueness about the National Youth Movement is that we're not no social group. To say we're not a youth group that only meets on a Saturdays or only meets on a Saturdays. We are an organization that has our office open, that has an administrative responsibility, that has financial responsibilities as well. We do have resources and services to provide, and so then it makes it a greater challenge to try to provide the support and the services that would be able to effectively make a difference for our children and young people.
Now, how did you go about starting up the organization? Obviously, that means you had to get other people on board with you. It means you had to have some startup funds, because you said you have an office already. How were you able to get those particular foundations set to be able to move forward?
Well, I did my own research, and I found, well, you have to go through the registration process. I did that, went to Belmopan, did my up and downs and so forth. And as you've mentioned, Shawn Saldano, not to be condescending, but is no stranger to Belize. Shawn Saldano has been in existence for some time, right on the summer program stage of Channel 5. Channel 5 in its own capacity has seen me grow and develop. And so when I spoke to my different colleagues at a national level, I do have some regional and international partners as well, and I said, you know something, this is where I am, this is what I want to do.
This is your element.
Exactly. And they were more than receptive. They said, well, you know something, Mr. Saldano, we have watched you over the years working in this sector, and we know that if we would be able to support and provide that encouraging environment for you, then we would be able to see something different and a tangible change in this country. The reality is that it was a turbulent journey, the National Youth Movement, in getting its way there. As you rightly pointed out, you needed a startup capital. I'll tell you the honest truth. Going to the financial institutions, they would say, well, Mr. Saldano, you don't have the proper amount of money that is required to give us that push for that startup loan and so forth. We were oftentimes rejected because, especially when you go to some of these institutions too, and they say, well, it's an NGO, you're not making back any profits. 3/4 of your money goes to the operations, the programs and the management, and the other 1/4. Of course, the reality is that we had to accommodate, we have a small staff of 4 of us, and in order to get the level of work that is required, we had to provide a stipend bi-weekly to our staff and so forth. So it was a rough journey, and gratefully we were able to overcome. We recently got our office space at the beginning of May, thanks to Vista Real Estate. We were looking all around before. We got our trade license from mid-April, and it was a very hectic responsibility because you should see some of the crazy prices that people wanted for rent and other things. And so went back to prayer. As I've mentioned, it was a faith turbulent journey. I kept the Almighty Father at the beginning and the center and the end of all the progress that the National Youth Movement has been making. And they reached out, the Real Vista Estate contacted us, Mr. Saldano, we have a spot for you right on Central American Boulevard, $500 a month, very spacious and so forth. And right away I called some of my colleagues, and the deal was sealed. By the evening we were able to make our down payments and so forth. And after that, we then had to get into a renovation stage. We do have my office, a receptionist area, a waiting area, a financial office, and we also have a conference room. We also have we are located at the upper flat. We have a very huge yard space as well. As I've mentioned, we're right on Boulevard. So we are able to reach our people as well. So it was a success.
So now that you have your operations base established, what do you, or let's start with your demographic. Who do you want to work with? Who are your ideal target populations that you want to access this organization?
Well, as I've mentioned in our mandate, firstly, we have to work with our children and young people. But the reality is that it cannot stop there. We can't try to change the conditions of that child, his or her behavior, his or her leadership skills and so forth, and then send them back into the same broken households. So then we have to tap into the families and households. We have to bring the parents on board, and we're not coming to provide trainings and so forth in such a way to parents that we will be telling them how to raise our children. That is not the case. We would then, you see, the beauty about what the National Youth Movement brings to the table is that we're reshifting the paradigm of youth development. It's no longer about programs and interventions. It goes with establishing strong, healthy relationships. So we have to build relationship with the child and the young person. We have to build relationship with the families and the households. Not only that, every household makes up a community. And so we have to then rebuild stronger communities. As we know, a lot of our Belizean communities are gang-ridden. They are filled with so many negative influences and so forth. How then do we change those type of dynamics that are in those society? It comes back to establishing a relationship. What we have to realize too is that peer respond to peer much better. And so if you're my peer, then listen to me. I know the struggles, I know the challenges, but also by us pooling our resources, by us sitting together at one table, we are able to brainstorm tangible solutions.
And when I asked about target areas, I think it obviously is very clear that you have a very broad base that you expect to work with, but obviously with funding and just the limited human resources that you have available to you, it's going to be very important perhaps to figure out your own particular niche. So when there are numerous youth organizations currently in place and youth programs in place, how do you differentiate the National Youth Movement versus all the rest?
Well, the difference that the National Youth Movement brings is that through the National Youth Movement, yes, despite our limited human resources as staff, we cannot use that as an excuse as to why we are not to be out in the communities. You see, a lot of our programs too and our interventional work will not be based only at the National Youth Movement, but we have to get into these communities. For instance, we are drafting up a human rights campaign, that it will not be a training where we go to, for instance, a nice facility and we spend so much money and what's not. We have to get into these impoverished communities that needs it the most, and this is the uniqueness that we're bringing. We're not coming to sit comfortably in our offices. We are coming to go into these communities and to provide the education that is needed, to provide the resources that is needed. I want to look at the framework of education, which is one of our greatest mandate. Education not only limited to the classroom setting, but education is important in the sense of the empowerment of the individuals. And so we have to promote literacy, we have to promote numeracy, we have to promote human rights, we have to promote our own fundamental rights. There are too many people in Belize that are illiterate, that don't understand who they are, their responsibilities in this nation. And a lot of those people stem from those persons who are in those communities who don't know to access these information, who don't know to access these resources. And so this is where we are actually going into these communities and saying, this is where we belong, and this is how we are able to help you through relationships.
You know, Shawn, this is an amazing undertaking. It's a lot of different things. It encompasses a lot of different aspects of youth development, and for the people listening, and I'm sure for Marlenia as well, it seems like a huge task for just the four of you. Tell us how you plan to ensure that your initiative doesn't just dash out the gate, burn out speed, and two, what are some of the initiatives within the movement that you are planning to accomplish within the first year at least?
Well, I'm glad that you pointed out that we have to be very strategic in how we implement what we have to do. As I mentioned, we recently opened our office for full operations 2 weeks back. And so we are still, for instance, summer is here. And so just yesterday evening before dismissal, we had a meeting amongst ourselves about what we will be doing to undertake for summer and even after. And I will share with you 2 projects that we have already set out to be implemented at least by September of this year. Amongst the summer activities, the September program, it will be the first tangible program that will continue. It's an agricultural program. It's named AGED, AGED, Agricultural Education, that will be, again, getting into these communities and these persons who are crying, well, we now have no jobs. What will we do about unemployment? The reality is the agricultural sector in Belize is an important industry that we must begin to look into. And as a young person, knowing the economic gain that Belize can benefit from that, we then have to take these informations, these resources, and these equipments to these people and say, listen to me, hey, we have an agricultural sector that needs revamp. And the beauty about it is that we will be training them, we will be equipping them with information, but we will also allow them to look within the region, Central America and the Caribbean, and even the international markets. What are some of the goods and services within the agricultural sector that are lacking? And how then Belize can begin to produce some of those agricultural goods and produces. That in its capacity, we are trying to secure, we have been, I don't want to say officially, but we have already received some donors who are interested in this program, who are saying, well, you know something, maybe we can start with, let's say, 50 or 100 acres of land, and we divide it half acre each, giving 200 to 300 young people an opportunity to get into the agricultural work. And from there, of course, you teach them how to turn over, you teach them all of that, all the agricultural skills and best practices. And then when it is harvest time, of course, they will have to go out and they market themselves. They have to get into the marketing strategies, of course.
Now, how will you tap into those young people? I think that's what we're trying to understand. Are you going to, because as much as you may have a vision of affecting all children and young people, you have to start somewhere. Will it be in your own backyard in the St. Martin's area? Will it be Port? Will it be out district children, young people? Who will you work with first?
Well, of course, we cannot, in the business of youth development, you'll find that you cannot really put any restrictions or limitations on people.
But even when you apply for funding, Shawn, you'll have to be able to outline this type of information.
All of that. But because of where our office is situated, which is Central American Boulevard, we are directly behind, for instance, Antelope Street and that area there. And so I know the youth liaison officer has already been making his rounds in that area there, trying to secure membership and persons who would be interested. I know this Friday here, we have a meeting with 50 of them. They will be coming to the office as well. And so that is one mechanism that we want to put in place. When we are through with that number 50, we will look at their demands, we will look at what they have been asking for and so forth. I will tell you a great number of persons are interested in employment. That the reality is that there is a high rate of unemployment, and so the young people cries that, well, no job is there, no job is there. It comes back to the mandate that we do have for entrepreneurship as well. We cannot allow our people to sit down and say, well, you know something, job is not there. This is where we come, we meet with them, of course, and we begin to build their potentials, build their abilities, and build their skills so that they are able then to become into the entrepreneurial business. Of course, there are serious challenges that we will be faced as when that is unfolded as well, because as you will know, every business requires a startup capital. And so the National Youth Movement in its own light is developing a youth development fund where we are bringing all our partners to the table to say, well, you know something, let us have one fund where young people, through, of course, we have to set up proper application processes, procedures, and so forth, are then able to access financial startup push system. So that in its own light is another project that the National Youth Movement hopes
So
to
you mentioned the agricultural program. What is the second program that you said you'll be launching?
The second program is the Human Rights Campaign. Okay. That will be focused.
That's an outreach education.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It will be focused. We have 3 areas. Jane Usher, the same area behind us, Antelope, which would be Colette. And we do have George Street, that area there. Of course, the second cohort of that training, which will take place November, December, of course, due to our very own funding resources, those things takes financial resources. So we have to strategically pace ourselves. We don't want to overwhelm ourselves. But these 3 areas, we are expecting to get an active campaign of promoting of fundamental human rights. As I've mentioned, there is a great level of illiteracy, especially within these areas, and there are too many people who do not know their fundamental human rights, who do not understand their fundamental responsibilities as citizens, not only of Belize, but of the world. We all have a responsibility to play, and you can't expect people to play their responsibility if they don't know what to do. And so going then into these communities through that outreach efforts and trying our very best to empower them, and it comes back to the relationship concept that I've been telling you about. You see, it's easier to set up a tent and chairs and tell people to come and have a facilitator.
That doesn't necessarily mean they'll come.
You understand? Having then a relationship and going, me as a CEO and my other staff knocking from your door, hello, can I come in, and so forth, taking those household campaigns into the household and say, listen to me, and getting the parents involved as well. Mommy, can you send your children here? And when the children, I mean, the beauty about it, what I practice too, is that every household I try my best to visit. And it's a very fun journey as well, because I move from one household to the next. Sometimes you get food here. Sometimes you go and you play family games with this family. Sometimes you get your breakfast. Sometimes you're called from my office. Oh, Mr. Saldano, you can come for lunch. And when you go, you share with the family and so forth. That is the type of relationship that we're establishing, so that when it is time to execute any program of activities or any project, then I'm able to call back and say, can you send your children? Can you come out? And next focus that we want to look at is community-based collaborative initiatives, where we actually get the communities to say, what do you want to see happen in our community, and how can we all put it to work in one way. So again, it's
definitely a tall order. And you know, I think one of the things is that when we see people who step forward who want to make a difference, it is a very commendable effort, and you've definitely done your groundwork in establishing the organization, your office, and now rolling out with your mandate. So Shawn, we're quickly running out of time. What do you want people to know about what they can expect to see from the National Youth Movement in the near future?
Well, the National Youth Movement is here as a youth-led NGO, as I've mentioned, to have a long-lasting impact on the young lives of this country. We want to see a difference in the crime and violence. We want to see a difference in the employment opportunities. We want to see a difference in the behaviors of our young people. As I've mentioned, we do have a mandate for leadership and decision making for media as well. And so using these elements, media, arts, we want to get more young people into media, into voicing their opinions, into being engaged in the decision making. And I think that in its own effort is, again, the National Youth Movement's reshifting of the paradigm of youth development. What we have to understand is that youth is not just recipient of youth services, but in this day and age, youth must be engaged as resources, as partners, as adults, with the same level of respect, expertise, and experiences. So we come with the drive to get young people to be more vocal, to be more active, to be more determined and committed, engaged at that, so that we can foster a better Belize and foster economic growth, development, and sustainability. Lastly, I just want to say the reality is that the young people of this land, the 70% of this land, will inherit this nation, whether we like it or not. And so it is a fundamental duty of the National Youth Movement as a youth-led agency to begin the preparations of our children and young people, of our entire nation, to begin to be able to receive the responsibilities that lies ahead. And so to our persons who are listening, as we know, the National Youth Movement is no millionaire. Well, we're not even in the 1,000 brackets either. We have a lot of curtailing with our budgets. We're very limited with our financial resources especially, but that shall not deter us. We are committed, and for persons who are out there who are listening and who are interested in the expansion and to see the vision of the National Youth Movement, not just come and then begin to slack off and so forth, but to ensure that it is consistent and it is forever engaging, we need everybody's support, because youth development is everybody's business.
Absolutely.
How can they find you to support you?
Well, the office, as I mentioned, is on Central American Boulevard, 3791. It is right, you know where Gwen Liz is, the lane that would bring you to the face of Gwen Liz entrance. Not down the lane, but right beside it, there is that big yellow and cream Lucky Star number 2 Chinese structure. Right beside it, there is, yes, beside that, the upper flat is our office. You can come by. We open Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 5. We do have a caretaker who gets there and open the office from 7 o'clock, just should in case there is anybody who would come in.
Your social media?
Yes, we do have a social media page, the National Youth Movement. On Instagram, it is the same. My cell is 627-6410, 627-6410. for anybody who is interested to support us. And it's not only financially, we do need that extra human resources. We need technical assistance. For instance, our office is not even completed yet. We do have far to go. We are using some funds to accommodate us and so forth. So we have far to go, but the mere fact that our existence has been established, we are grateful.
Well, we appreciate you stopping in to share with us the momentum of the National Youth Movement, and we wish you the best of luck, Shawn.
Definitely.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead now and take a break, and when we come back, the top performers of the PSC from Bernice York School. That's coming up after the break.